Hi, I'm Evangeline, and I used to think the worst thing in a marriage was silence, until the silence started tasting bitter, like warm milk laced with something I never agreed to drink. My husband smiled every night, handed me the same cup, told me I was just stressed. But behind that smile, he was logging into my accounts, stealing my name, draining everything I built. He even told people I was mentally unstable, just in case I ever dared to speak. And the people I loved? They believed him. Now I wonder, how long had he planned to disappear with my money, my identity, my life? And how many others saw it happening and said nothing? The first thing I noticed was the way my breath fogged up the window. Outside, the Oregon sky had turned that flat gray that always signaled mid-November. Trees in our yard were nearly bare, their branches trembling in the breeze. I had just set the table for two, again. The quiet hum of the dishwasher behind me was the only sound in the house. Garrett walked in from the den, carrying two mugs. "Got your milk, sweetheart," he said, like he did every night. The warmth of his voice used to make me feel safe. Now it landed differently, like a song I'd heard too many times. I smiled, took the mug from him, and watched as he turned to check the front door lock. The gesture felt rehearsed. He always brought the milk, always locked up, every single night. When he returned, I forced myself to sip. The milk was warm, familiar. But that night, something tasted off. It wasn't dramatic, not sour, just faintly bitter, like it had sat too long in metal or touched something it shouldn't have. I lowered the mug slowly. I said, trying not to sound too deliberate. "What?" Garrett glanced at me from the couch, a hint of a grin tugging at his lips. "Bad batch?" "Maybe," I replied. "Tastes a little strange." He shrugged. "Might have been close to the date." I grabbed it from the back of the fridge. He didn't look concerned. Too casual, too smooth. I nodded, but in my gut something turned. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. Something I had been pretending not to see. That night, I didn't finish the milk. The next morning, I woke up groggy. I had vague dreams of voices I couldn't place, of rooms that weren't mine. My head throbbed like I'd had wine, but I hadn't touched a drop. Garrett was already dressed and reading emails at the kitchen island. "Morning," he said without looking up. "You slept like a rock." I smiled weakly and poured myself a glass of water, but my hands trembled. Later that afternoon, I pulled a notebook from the drawer in my home office, one of those old spiral ones from college I never threw out. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "Day 1, didn't finish milk. Head still foggy. Garrett too calm. Tasted something off." As I wrote, memories came back in fragments. The week before, I'd missed 2 client calls I didn't remember scheduling. I sent a file to the wrong folder and forgot my password. Twice. Garrett had joked, "You're losing your edge, babe." I'd laughed. But I hadn't laughed inside. Now, I wasn't sure I was losing anything, except clarity. That night, when Garrett handed me another warm mug, I thanked him, then carried it to the sink under the pretense of rinsing a spoon. I held the cup under the faucet, just enough water to thin it out. I brought it back to the couch and pretended to drink, letting the rim touch my lips while my eyes stayed fixed on the TV. Garrett watched me. Or rather, watched the cup. It was then I knew I had to stop playing along. The next morning, I found my laptop slightly out of place. Just a half inch, but enough to make me notice. I never left it open, and I certainly didn't leave the browser up on my online banking. "Did you open my laptop?" I asked casually while pouring coffee. Garrett barely looked up. "Yeah, I was cleaning the desk. It looked dusty. Figured I'd wipe it down." I smiled. "Thanks." Inside, I wanted to scream. That night, I poured the milk directly into the sink. Not a drop left behind. I rinsed the mug, refilled it with water, and sat on the couch. Garrett glanced over. "Not in the mood tonight?" he asked. I shook my head. "Stomach's a little off." He accepted the answer too easily. I laid in bed that night, Muscles still, breath steady, pretending to sleep. My ears strained for every creak, every footstep. The hallway light flicked on beneath the door, casting shadows across the floor. I kept still. I didn't move. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought it might give me away. I had no plan, just suspicion. And in that moment, more than fear, I felt something else rise in me. Clarity. I lay frozen, my breath carefully controlled, my body heavy with feigned sleep. Outside our bedroom door, I heard the soft creak of the floorboard Garrett always stepped on when crossing the hall. A pause, then retreating steps. He didn't check on me that night, not like the others. When I opened my eyes, the room was still cloaked in dim light. My muscles ached from holding the same position too long. But what unnerved me more was the familiar fog settling over my thoughts again. As if my mind had been on mute for hours. Time didn't just pass, it had skipped. Downstairs, I tried to retrace my evening. I found my phone in the fridge, beside the eggs. A half-written email sat open on my laptop, addressed to my boss, but unfinished. I didn't remember writing it. I didn't remember starting it. I closed the tab, heart pounding. Later that day, while on a Zoom call, a colleague hesitated mid-sentence and then said, "Evangeline, are you okay? You've seemed a bit off lately." I forced a laugh. "I've been a little tired. Probably need a reset." "You might consider taking a short leave," Garrett suggested that evening while we sat in the den. "You've been overwhelmed. Your energy's been scattered." I didn't respond, but I noted how he phrased it, scattered, not stressed, like he was building a case against me in casual conversation. The next morning, I stepped outside to water the porch plants. It was misty, Portland's kind of damp that seeps into your bones. That's when I ran into Lily, the retired trauma nurse from 2 houses down. She waved and walked over, her thick sweater speckled with droplets. We chatted about the weather, holiday plans, the usual small talk. Then, unprompted, she leaned in and said, "You ever feel not quite like yourself? Like someone pressed pause on parts of you?" I blinked. "My aunt went through that," she continued. "Turned out her husband was slipping something in her coffee. Took her 6 months to catch on. If you ever feel foggy without a reason, trust that feeling." I smiled politely, but inside, the words carved a hollow into my chest. When she left, I went back inside and sat silently at the kitchen table, watching the steam curl from my mug. Could it be that simple? Could it be that horrifying? That night, I installed a small motion camera above the hallway door, one of those discreet battery-operated models I picked up on impulse a year ago. Just in case, I told myself then. Now it had purpose. The trash became my next obsession. Each day, I sifted through it when Garrett was out. I knew what I was looking for: packaging, residue, blister packs with missing pills. Nothing. Not yet. In my journal, I wrote, "What if I'm imagining all this? But what if I'm not?" One afternoon, as I shut my laptop, I noticed a browser tab open to my bank. I hadn't logged in all week. The page was idle, but the timestamp was recent. Garrett walked in just then, carrying 2 bags of groceries. "I was checking to see if your paycheck had cleared," he said casually. "You were asleep." I nodded slowly. "Next time, just ask." His face didn't flinch. "Didn't think you'd mind." I didn't argue. I started screenshotting everything after that. Browser history, logins, timestamps. I backed up files to a cloud I created under a different name. Each detail became part of a growing record I wasn't even sure I'd use, but needed to have. I bought a burner phone, something cheap and prepaid from the pharmacy. I took photos of pill bottles, of Garrett's laptop left open, with unfamiliar email accounts logged in. I recorded voice memos detailing every suspicion. If no one else believed me, at least I would believe myself. The house felt less like a home and more like a stage scene. Garrett's kindness, his attentiveness, it all rang too clean, too curated. Every touch, every gesture, like he was playing a role for someone just out of frame. I didn't tell anyone yet. Not even Colleen, my closest friend and confidant since college. I wanted proof. Not just feelings. I needed truth that could withstand denial. One night, I heard Garrett on the phone in the garage. The door was cracked just enough for the sound to spill in. No, not yet. She still thinks it's just work stress. Yeah, once everything clears, we can go. I stepped back from the door without a sound. My hands were steady, my heart oddly calm. Later, in bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to him breathe beside me. And for the first time, I wasn't scared. I didn't know then that truth would come with a cost I hadn't dared imagine. But I was about to learn just how quickly doubt turned into danger, and how easily the people I once trusted would become strangers. It started with a receipt. I was at the bank, waiting for a printed copy of my last 3 statements. Just routine. Or so I thought. The clerk behind the glass, Melissa, I think her name was, paused for just a beat too long while handling the papers. Then, without looking up, she said, "Someone tried to confirm your PIN over the phone yesterday." Her voice was soft, like she didn't want to get caught saying it. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She kept her eyes on the monitor. It was flagged. Looked suspicious. It wasn't you, right? I didn't answer. I just smiled, took the papers, and thanked her. But I could barely keep my hand from trembling as I folded the receipt. On the drive home, I gripped the steering wheel so hard I left half moons in the leather. This wasn't just Garrett being concerned. It wasn't him being overly helpful or protective. It was premeditated. That night, I called Marla, my college roommate, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while but always trusted. I needed to hear a voice that didn't belong to someone rehearsing lines. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Evie, wow, it's been forever." I got right to it. "Marla, can I ask you something? And I need you to answer as just a friend, not someone who's heard anything else." Silence. Then, "Garrett told us you were going through something. He said you'd been paranoid, that you might say things that don't make sense." My breath caught in my throat. "I'm only asking because, are you okay? Are you safe right now?" I hung up. Not out of anger, out of grief. Garrett had already reached her. He'd spun the story so cleanly that even my truth sounded like delusion. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lost. I was simply late to realizing the playbook he'd written behind my back. The next morning, I sat at the dining table, staring at the condensation on my glass of water. My thoughts kept rewinding to moments I had laughed off, brushed aside. Garrett bringing me vitamins each morning, double-checking my schedule for mistakes, finishing my sentences in front of friends as if I couldn't remember them. And me? I had smiled, deflected, said things like, "I guess I'm just getting old," or, "It's nice to have someone looking out for me." I saw it now for what it was. A long game, 1,000 small edits to my autonomy. I remembered a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt I'd read years ago, scribbled on a card at a bookstore. "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she's in hot water." I didn't laugh at it this time. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Simple at first. Dates, times, memory gaps. Then browser activity, symptoms, Garrett's behavior. I created columns for patterns, for emotional reactions. For every night he said, "You're just tired." For every morning, I woke up feeling like someone had vacuumed my clarity. The more I typed, the steadier I felt. Facts don't gaslight you. Later that week, I stopped talking as much. I nodded instead of answering. Let him speak first. Took note of his exact words. "I'm worried about you," he'd say. "You've been so forgetful." "I know," I'd reply. "It scares me too." But it didn't scare me. Not anymore. It made me furious. I made a silent promise. I wouldn't ask again. I'd confirm. The next morning, Garrett left early for a meeting. I waited 15 minutes, then pulled out the step stool from the pantry and unscrewed the vent above my desk. It had been years since I dusted it, but that made it the perfect hiding spot. I slipped a tiny pin camera inside, angled directly at my workspace. When I finished, I sat back on the floor, wiping sweat from my brow with the sleeve of my cardigan. The house was quiet again, but the air no longer felt still. It felt poised, like something was holding its breath. I wasn't sure what I'd capture, but I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want to see what he'd do when he thought I was asleep again, but I had to. The footage wasn't cinematic, no eerie music, no dramatic shadows, just the soft hum of our hallway light and the quiet click of our bedroom door closing. My breath caught as I sat on the edge of my desk chair, laptop open, watching the small square video feed on the screen. Garrett appeared in the frame, his posture relaxed, too casual for someone supposedly worried about his wife's well-being. He moved with practiced precision. In his left hand, my laptop. In his right, his phone. He opened the laptop, my laptop, like he'd done it 1,000 times. And maybe he had. The password he typed took less than 2 seconds. He navigated to a folder I didn't recognize, dragged files, took photos with his phone. He whispered something as he tapped on the keyboard. I turned the volume up. Just a whisper, but clear enough. Almost done. My body went rigid. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't made it up. I sat still for several minutes after the video ended, blinking at the screen, watching the image freeze on Garrett, closing the laptop, and walking back down the hallway. Then I reached for a USB drive and saved the entire clip. I duplicated it and slipped the second drive into the side pocket of my purse. Later, I moved that one to a hidden slot in the glove box of my car, wrapped in an old grocery receipt. Never confront a liar without leverage, I whispered to myself. I'd read that in a Malcolm Gladwell book once. At the time, it sounded clever. Tonight, it felt like gospel. The next morning was almost laughably normal. The smell of toast, the sound of the blender, Garrett humming under his breath, cheerful, as if nothing had happened. He handed me a smoothie with the same smile he'd used the night we met. Orange, ginger, and a bit of turmeric, he said. Good for stress. I smiled back, but only on the outside. Inside, I was counting every move he made, every inflection in his voice. As I sipped the smoothie, just enough to wet my lips, I noticed his eyes flicker, just briefly. He was watching my reaction, noticing if I finished the drink. I left it on the counter and mumbled something about needing to change the laundry. He said nothing, just nodded. That evening, I watched the footage again. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed to remember why I couldn't let it go. Later that night, Garrett didn't come to bed. He claimed he had reports to finish, some late-night deadlines. I didn't argue. I curled under the blanket and waited. Around 12:30, I slipped out of bed and padded to the office. I kept the hallway light off, relying on memory to avoid creaks in the floor. The office door was ajar. I stayed just outside the frame of view. He was at my laptop again. This time, I recognized the banking app he had open. He navigated with ease, transferred documents from a hidden folder into a cloud drive I didn't own. I held my phone to record, silently, even though I already had enough proof. This was no longer just about collecting evidence. It was about witnessing him become the man I didn't recognize. I waited until he left, until he shut off the light and padded back down the hall. Then I sat at my desk, heart pounding, hands trembling. I saved the new clip. I labeled it with the date. I made 3 backups. Then I stared at the black screen for what felt like an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't question it anymore. This ends now. But not with yelling. With proof. I opened a private browser tab and searched for legal consultations in the area. I found one that offered same-day calls, no ID verification required. I booked a slot under a name I hadn't used in years, my grandmother's maiden name, just in case. The confirmation email landed in my inbox 30 seconds later. I closed my laptop slowly, stood up, and walked back toward the bedroom. I knew I had 48 hours, maybe less, before he noticed what I was about to do. I didn't sleep the night I booked the consultation. My eyes stayed open long after Garrett's breathing had settled into its usual rhythm, long after the house had gone still. I stared at the ceiling and recited a silent list of everything I had seen, everything I now knew. By dawn, my decision was made. Colleen's office was exactly as I remembered it from years ago when I helped her design the financial tracking system for her practice. Modest, organized, sharp-edged. She barely blinked when I handed her the USB. She plugged it in, scrolled through the footage and the screen captures, the email threads. After 15 minutes, she leaned back and let out a low breath. "We're not just dealing with deceit," she said. "This is organized identity fraud." She clicked on one email I had flagged. It was sent from a Gmail account I didn't recognize, but the writing was unmistakably Garrett's. Colleen read it aloud. "The money will be out by Friday. She won't even know it's gone." I didn't flinch, not anymore. Colleen glanced up. "You're sitting on a landmine of legal leverage, but we have to act now." I nodded. "I'm ready." That afternoon, I changed every password. Bank accounts, insurance logins, cloud storage. I contacted our mortgage servicer to flag the house deed, initiated a lock on shared investment accounts, and moved personal items, documents, jewelry, a small cash reserve, to a secure box at a different branch under my maiden name. "I won't be the woman who waited until everything was gone," I told Colleen over the phone later. "Not this time." I remembered my Aunt Diane, how she had trusted her ex to handle things during their divorce, only to find herself locked out of accounts, her credit ruined. It had taken her years to recover. I refused to play that role. By the next morning, the lies had started feeling louder. Garrett walked into the kitchen with his usual smug ease, holding a coffee for me, and wearing that passive smile that used to comfort me. Now it only sparked revulsion. "You've been looking refreshed lately," he said, kissing my forehead. I fought the urge to spit something back and smiled instead. "Funny how clarity clears up the skin," he chuckled, oblivious. But when I checked the shared savings account from my burner phone later, the balance was lower than it should have been. Not suspiciously so, just enough to make me notice. I reported the discrepancy. Quietly, professionally. That evening, Colleen called with something new. She sounded more clipped than usual. "You might want to sit down," she said. "I pulled Garrett's name through medical databases, based on a hunch. He filed a request for a psychological evaluation under your name 3 weeks ago. The records list you as mentally erratic." I stared at the wall. "He's trying to discredit me." "He's laying the groundwork to paint you unstable," she replied. "If this escalates legally, he'll argue you're not fit to make decisions." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then I stood, walked into my home office, and typed a single sentence into a document titled, "If I Disappear." Check Garrett's laptop first. I uploaded it to a private folder in my cloud storage and shared access with Colleen only. The next few days blurred into a series of quiet maneuvers. No arguments, no slips. I moved a small suitcase, nothing flashy, just enough to vanish with dignity, into the trunk of my car while Garrett took a shower. I left my favorite coat behind. That would have looked suspicious. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror, not out of vanity, just to remember the version of me who existed before she was gaslit into questioning her sanity. "I'm not running," I whispered to my reflection. "I'm reclaiming." Later, long after Garrett had fallen asleep, my phone buzzed on the windowsill. "Colleen." I answered with a whisper. "Yes?" "Evangeline. He just tried to apply for a loan in your name, using the fake eval file." Silence pulsed between us. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. Instead, I said, "Then he just crossed the line, and I'm already on the other side." And that's when I realized I wasn't just leaving. I was escaping. The next morning, the cold clarity of that truth sat with me as I sat on the edge of our bed, watching Garrett tie his tie in the hallway mirror. He didn't notice the way my eyes moved, not with suspicion, but with purpose. I knew what I had to do, and for once, I felt no hesitation. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're quiet today." I offered a faint smile. "Just tired." He nodded, grabbed his keys, and left. I didn't wait long. Within 20 minutes, I was at the bank, wearing sunglasses and a heavy scarf, not for disguise, but for distance. The lockbox Colleen helped me arrange was already prepared. I slid in the envelope, USBs, printed emails, photos, and the journal entries I'd written over the last month. I sealed it shut like I was sealing a chapter of my life. Maybe I was. By noon, I had called Diane, my sister's friend in Boise. I didn't go into detail, just said I needed a place for a while. "Just a little break. Work's been too much," I offered. She didn't ask many questions. "Guest room's yours." Colleen's message came through while I was driving home. "Loan apps in underwriting. It's real now. No greeting, no fluff. Just the truth." I parked in the garage, took a deep breath, and walked back inside. Garrett was on a conference call, earbuds in, nodding at his laptop. He barely noticed me walk past him to the kitchen. I smiled when he looked up. "Just grabbing water." "Doing okay?" he asked, tilting his head. "Better," I replied. "Might nap later." That night, I stayed up after he fell asleep. Quietly, methodically, I copied every contact from my phone into a new encrypted folder on my backup device. I didn't want him knowing who I might reach out to. Then I swapped out my real journal, the one with everything, in exchange for a decoy one I'd written to make me sound erratic and unsure. If he ever read it, it'd only confirm the story he'd been telling others. I slid the fake journal into the drawer, tucked behind a stack of old bills. The real one stayed locked in the glove box. The next morning, while gathering files for work, I opened my laptop and froze. It wouldn't boot. A quick inspection revealed why. The hard drive was gone, not crashed, not corrupted, removed, no panic, no screaming. Just a quiet text to Colleen. "It's happening faster than we thought." She replied 2 minutes later. "Move. Soon." By afternoon, I was sitting at a different bank, one that had no link to Garrett. The teller was young, friendly, and didn't ask many questions when I requested to open a new account under a variation of my name. I transferred just enough funds to prepare for what was coming. The rest I left untouched, for now. I walked out with my head high and my hat pulled low. On the street, everything looked the same. Coffee shops still buzzed, couples still held hands, buses still ran late. But to me, the world had tilted. I felt like a fugitive from my own life, like someone who had committed no crime but knew she was about to be hunted. That night, after Garrett went to bed, I removed my wedding ring and placed it gently on the nightstand. I looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time in years. It wasn't heavy. It was hollow. I wrote one sentence on a note card, folded it, and left it beneath the ring. This is not abandonment. This is survival. At 4:57 a.m., I slipped out the door with a single duffel bag and didn't look back. The car was already packed. The house was dark. My chest was tight, but my steps were sure. As I reversed down the driveway, something in me made me glance up toward the second floor. And there he was, Garrett, standing in the window, watching me. And he smiled. That smile would haunt me for weeks. And he smiled. That smile would haunt me for weeks. It was the kind of smile that said he knew exactly what I was doing, and worse, he didn't care. Or maybe he thought I wasn't brave enough to follow through. That look stayed with me as I drove past the city limits, my mind racing but my hands steady. The silence of that morning was broken not by my fear, but by a message I didn't expect. I had texted my sister the night before I left. Just one line. "Can we talk privately?" No details, No drama. Her reply never came. When I opened our family group chat to check for a response, it was gone. Or more accurately, I was gone, removed. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was our mother. "Evangeline," she said, her voice tight, rehearsed. "I got a call from Garrett. He said you're not well. He's worried. We're all worried. Do you need help?" The words didn't hit me like concern. They struck like confirmation. He had gotten to her too. "Mom," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "There's more going on here than you know." "I'm sure there is," she said quietly. "But maybe it's better to let Garrett handle things for now." That line, "let Garrett handle things." I hadn't just lost a marriage, I had lost a tribe. Over the next few days, the shift spread like mold. Quiet, invisible at first, then suddenly everywhere. Friends from our old church stopped liking my posts. Women I used to grab coffee with now gave short replies. Garrett's version of me, fragile, forgetful, maybe unstable, had moved faster than I ever could. I tried to push past it, stay focused. But that ache, that grief, sat in my chest like wet clothes after a storm. One night, I revisited old footage, more out of habit than purpose. The hallway camera, Garrett in the office again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. His laptop screen was visible, a video call. And there she was, Leora. Her voice soft, practiced. "She's isolating herself," she said. Garrett laughed. "The crazier she sounds, the faster we win." I watched my husband and his mistress strategize over my mental unraveling like it was a business pitch. My hands trembled, but I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just wrote it down. Time, date, clip number. I added it to the file. The next morning, I drove across town and opened a P.O. box under a name I hadn't used since college. I registered a Shell LLC through Colleen's firm and used it to move the car title solely to me. Piece by piece, I was peeling myself off the map we had drawn together. Then, in my dimly lit apartment, I recorded a video message. Not for Garrett. For me. The version of me who might one day wonder if she was imagining all this. "If no one believes you," I said to the camera, "believe this version of you." She saw it, she endured it, and she's not making it up. That night, the knife came from where I'd prayed it never would. Colleen called. "I need to tell you something," she said, "but it's going to hurt." "What?" "Your brother signed a character reference. For Garrett. On official court letterhead. He's claiming you've shown instability for months." The room didn't spin. My stomach didn't drop. It cracked. "You bleed for a family," I whispered, "and they still choose your abuser." She didn't respond. I stared at the ceiling, remembering Christmas dinners I had cooked alone while they all joked in the other room. Remembering every favor, every ride given, every bill quietly covered, every birthday card sent with too much cash inside. And for what? Not even silence, but betrayal. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Colleen. "They've submitted evidence of your instability to the bank." And that's when I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I became the rescue. And that's when I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I became the rescue. Colleen sat across from me in her office, the blinds drawn low to keep out the late afternoon sun. She had 2 stacks of documents between us, one labeled evidence, the other immediate action. There were folders thick with screenshots, emails, printed messages, financial statements marked in yellow ink. I could feel the weight of it all pressing into the air around us. "Is this everything?" she asked, not looking up. I nodded. "And a backup in the lockbox." Colleen slid over a crisp envelope. "You'll want to deliver this in a way he won't expect." I took it without opening it. Inside was a formal letter, simple, direct. "You know what you did. I know what you did. Let's see what the law thinks." That evening, I slipped the envelope into Garrett's work briefcase while he was in the shower. The bag lay on the kitchen chair like always, half zipped. He'd never notice. The next morning, I stayed out of sight, watched from my car as he walked out, coffee in hand, expression unreadable. He hadn't opened the envelope yet, but when he did, the clock would start ticking. By noon, Colleen submitted the forged loan paperwork to the bank's fraud unit. The document Garrett had filed with my name and falsified signature was airtight, on the surface, but I had proof of its creation. Timestamps, file metadata, even his voice in the background of one video saying, "Just sign it for now, she won't know." The bank froze all joint accounts within the hour. At his firm, Garrett tried to put on the usual charm, but cracks began to show. People noticed he was avoiding eye contact, taking more calls outside, disappearing during meetings. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't explain myself. I just sent a manila envelope, anonymous, containing redacted documents and internal screenshots of emails to the firm's HR department. The return address was my new P.O. box. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was strategy. Late that evening, my phone rang. My brother. "What the hell is going on, Evangeline?" I let the question hang for a moment. "You should ask Garrett, or the bank." "Mom's calling me crying. You've got the whole family tied up in knots." "I didn't tie anything," I said. "I just stopped untying their messes." Then I hung up and blocked his number. The next day, I went through every account I still had access to. I changed passwords. I switched out recovery emails. I initiated the formal process of sealing off any shared assets. Colleen helped draft a motion to request that all contact be funneled through legal channels. No more surprise texts. No more late-night knocks on doors. And then, I filed for a police wellness check at my new apartment, just a request to have patrols pass by. The officer who took my form didn't ask too many questions, but he looked me in the eye and said, "We see this more than you'd think." By the time Garrett realized what was happening, it was already too late. He showed up at the old house the following afternoon. I wasn't there, but someone else was. The process server. The man handed Garrett a thick packet and said, "You've been served." He stood in the doorway for a second too long, disbelief etched on his face. Then, slowly, he smiled. But this time, I was the one holding the evidence. And he smiled again. But this time, I was the one holding the evidence. I parked across the street from the house that used to be mine. The hydrangeas in the front yard had browned from neglect. The porch light flickered. Signs of a home rotting from the inside out. Garrett stepped onto the front step just as the server walked up the drive. The envelope was thick. Legal. Final. Garrett took it without flinching. His eyes scanned the first few lines. His jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw confusion instead of confidence. I didn't move from my car. I just watched. By the end of the day, I heard from Colleen. The bank had frozen every account with his name on it. Leora had cut ties completely, blocked him on every platform, including the burner accounts they thought I didn't know about. His firm initiated a full ethics review after HR received documentation with his signature on forged applications. One of the managing partners, who'd always shaken my hand too tightly, sent a memo suspending him from client-facing duties, pending legal clarity. He didn't know yet that I had parked nearby, that I'd been the one to deliver every breadcrumb to its destination, that he wasn't just being investigated, he was being unmasked. The next day, my voicemail filled up within hours. First messages pleading, then shouting, then that sing-song sarcasm he used when pretending he wasn't unraveling. I didn't listen to most of them. He showed up at the house again. This time, the one I had leased on my own under a different name. He stood outside the front door, unshaven, his shirt wrinkled. "You don't get to win," he muttered through the door. The hallway camera caught every word. "You were never strong enough for that." I didn't open the door. I didn't respond. I just watched the clip later with Colleen and forwarded it directly to the officer assigned to our protective detail. Then I deleted it from my phone. That same evening, my brother emailed, A wall of text, rambling and contradictory. Apologies tucked inside excuses. I didn't know. He seemed convincing. You should have just handled this privately. I closed the email without reading the second half. It was never about privacy. It was about power. And I wasn't playing his game anymore. My mother still hadn't called. Not even after everything. Not when the fraud was confirmed. Not when the documents became public record. And yet, it didn't sting like I thought it would. I hadn't lost my family. I just stopped making excuses for them. Colleen updated me mid-week. 2 subpoenas issued, police actively reviewing video evidence and records of the forged medical evaluation. Identity theft, wire fraud, maybe more, depending on what else turned up. She pushed the affidavit across the table toward me. Sign when you're ready. I didn't hesitate. My name, my real name, the one I'd almost let him erase, hit the page with steady ink. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sank into the couch. No music, no phone, no Garrett. For the first time in months, I heard nothing but the hum of my own breath. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote, "Sometimes silence isn't what happens when you lose your voice. It's what happens when you find your power." My phone buzzed once. New email, subject line, from Leora. "We need to talk." I didn't think she'd ever reach out, but the moment I saw her name, I knew another war was coming. I didn't think she'd ever reach out, but the moment I saw her name, I knew another war was coming. Leora's message was short. No pleasantries, no justification. "I didn't know it would go this far. I want to talk, off the record." I stared at it for a long time, letting her words roll through me like fog over an empty street. Colleen advised caution, but gave me the green light to proceed, so long as I recorded everything legally. I agreed to the call, not to reconcile, but to confirm what I already suspected. We spoke the next morning. Leora's voice was softer than I remembered. Tentative. "Garrett told me it was just financial restructuring," she said. "He never mentioned medication. I didn't know he had filed anything medical in your name." "You didn't ask?" She hesitated. I trusted him. I clicked the record button on my phone. She continued, "The signature, I saw it. But he said it was fine. Said it was just paperwork. He always said you were too emotional to handle finances anyway." There it was. Not just the crime, but the intent. Later that day, I met Colleen in her office. I played the recording. She didn't flinch. "This goes straight to the DA," she said. "We're escalating." We weren't just building a case anymore. We were pulling back the curtain. An anonymous email landed in Colleen's inbox that night. The sender used a name I didn't recognize, but the contents were damning. Chat logs from Garrett's office, Slack. He had bragged openly about finding a way to empty her accounts without her noticing. Another message read, "She thinks she's clever, but confusion is easy to manufacture when you're in charge of the narrative." Colleen compiled the new evidence, added it to the file. The charges expanded: conspiracy, medical fraud, identity theft. I didn't feel victory, not yet, but I felt gravity shift. Later that week, I sat in a therapist's office for the first time in years. I told her about the gaps in my memory, the way I second-guessed myself, the stretch of nights that felt more like erased chapters than sleep. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said simply, "Trauma delayed is still trauma. You survived, and that's enough." It didn't feel like enough yet, but her words planted something. That evening, I bought a painting. Abstract, messy, shades of crimson and smoke. It didn't match anything in my apartment, but it made me feel something. It was the first thing I'd bought for beauty, not function, in almost a decade. I wrote again, nightly, not evidence, not timelines, just thoughts, observations. My voice, without fear of interruption. One afternoon, I received a card in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, "We believed him. I'm so sorry." Signed only with an initial, one of Garrett's assistants, I guessed. I didn't respond, but I saved the card. My credit score had started to repair. My accounts were locked tight. I had nothing left that he could reach. Not legally, not personally. I thought I'd feel euphoric. Instead, I just felt still. Then the letter came. Court notice. Garrett's trial date had been set. I was listed as the lead witness. I sat with the paper in my lap for several minutes. Not because I doubted what I'd say, but because I knew what it would cost to say it all out loud, under oath, in front of strangers. Still, I folded the letter and slid it into my file drawer. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But peace sometimes requires a public reckoning. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. But peace sometimes requires a public reckoning. The week before the trial moved both quickly and strangely slow, like walking through molasses with a fire at your back. Every morning started with coffee. Every evening ended with a call from Colleen. We reviewed my statement in long sessions, picking apart timelines, verifying screenshots, sharpening each word until it sliced cleanly. Colleen reminded me, "This isn't just a courtroom, it's a reckoning for everything you endured quietly." I'd wake up before sunrise some days, startled by silence. But it wasn't the fearful silence I'd grown used to. It was something else, full, honest. I cooked again. Simple things. Stew, cornbread, food that reminded me I still had a body worth nourishing. One morning, I opened my phone to a ping from a stranger's handle. It was the old Instagram account, the fake one Garrett and Leora had built to mock me. It had finally been reported. I never flagged it. But someone did. The post that brought it down was a photo of me at a family barbecue, captioned with some snide joke about instability. But now, the comments were different. "I used to think she was crazy. Now I think she's brave." She kept quiet while being erased. That's strength. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. The day before court, I got a single text from my brother. "Good luck tomorrow." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of the letter he wrote on Garrett's behalf. Just one more attempt to keep his hands clean without lifting a finger. My mother never called. Never even sent a message. I didn't cry over it. But I did write in my journal. I didn't need their sorry. I needed my silence back. The courthouse steps were slick with drizzle the morning of the trial. I wore a navy blue suit, flats, no makeup. I wanted to walk in looking like no one else but myself, undeniably real. Inside the courtroom, Garrett sat beside his attorney, shoulders a little too stiff, eyes darting toward me once, and then never again. Leora was there too, her posture curled in on itself like a wilted fern. She wore soft pink, the color of innocence. I didn't bother to meet her gaze. When they called me to the stand, I stood calmly, walked slowly, sat upright. I spoke without shaking. I answered every question clearly. I stated facts, not feelings. I let the evidence speak where I didn't need to. My voice didn't crack, not once. I didn't look back at Garrett, not when he fidgeted in his seat, not when his attorney objected, not when the judge overruled. His silence was no longer mine to interpret. When they dismissed for deliberation, Colleen and I stepped outside. The clouds had lifted. A local reporter waited near the bottom of the stairs. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked, microphone raised, tone overly bright. I paused. "No," I said. "I feel free." That's when Colleen stepped closer, placing her hand lightly on my shoulder. "There's something else," she said, voice lower than before. "About your father, you need to know." My heart didn't race, but my breath did pause. The story I thought ended in court had one more name left to reveal. My own. The story I thought ended in court had one more name left to reveal. My own. It started with a manila envelope on Colleen's desk. She slid it toward me, without a word, but her eyes told me it mattered. Inside was a sealed financial document, dated 12 years earlier, signed by my father before he passed. A private trust, established solely in my name. Untouched, hidden from marital assets. A protection I never knew he had set up, and Garrett had tried desperately to make vanish. "He found the copy in the house months ago," Colleen said. He shredded it, thinking that was enough. But I had requested the original from the archive when I first took your case. It was already here. That document closed every loophole Garrett thought he could exploit. It wasn't just financial evidence, it was the final nail. A signature from the grave he couldn't forge. Weeks later, Garrett stood before the court for sentencing. His attorney tried one last pivot. Paint me as bitter, emotionally rigid. Garrett himself played the same tune, calculated charm, peppered with comments about my withdrawal from reality. I sat silent, watching him. When the bailiff cuffed his wrists, Garrett looked at me. I didn't speak to him, but in my head, I whispered, "You almost erased me, but I became the one you couldn't delete." He left the courtroom in silence. That was the last time I saw him. 3 months later, I moved to a quiet town in Oregon wine country. Rolling hills, gravel roads, the scent of lavender cutting through heat. I rented a cottage with a slanted roof and opened a small bookkeeping office. Nothing grand, just enough to offer services to women who'd been through what I had. Twice a week, I volunteered at a legal support center nearby, helping women navigate paperwork, divorce forms, budgeting. I didn't give them my story. I gave them structure, calm, answers. One of them cried once and said, "No one's ever explained it without making me feel small." The work wasn't loud, but it was mine. Then came the letter, unopened. Garrett's handwriting on the front. I slid it into the trash. I didn't need whatever version of him still thought he deserved my attention. Days later, my brother emailed. No groveling, no real apology. Just, "Hope you're doing okay." I wrote back. We all had a chance to stand up for what's right. I took mine. And that was all. The rest of the noise faded over time, bit by bit, like a radio slowly dialing away from static. My credit recovered. My mind steadied. My sense of self was no longer tethered to the validation of people who didn't care enough to protect me. I started writing. Not a blog, not notes for therapy, a memoir. The title of the first chapter came to me like a whisper from the past. The milk tasted off. In the evenings, I would sit on the back porch, wine glass untouched beside me, and write. Sometimes it was hard to relive those moments, but I didn't write for catharsis. I wrote for record, for memory, for the woman I used to be who doubted herself every time someone smiled at her while hiding a lie behind their teeth. And I wrote for the women who might still be in that stage. The final line I wrote in that first chapter wasn't dramatic. It wasn't triumphant. It was just truth. Sometimes the people who break you don't deserve to see the person you become. I stared out over the vineyard as the sun dipped below the hills. A soft knock echoed from the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a woman stood there. Her face was unfamiliar, but something in her eyes looked familiar. Tired, but awake. She held a printed copy of an article about the case, folded and worn. "You don't know me," she said, voice unsteady, "but you saved me." And with that, I smiled. Not for what I lost, but for what I refused to lose again. The last word was mine.